Apologies, I had to pause the video because my husband came in with the dog, and the dog needed to be said hello to because I also have a dog who I love very much. Anyway, getting back to Byron and the summer of 1816. So the weather was greatly affected by this volcano eruption, and 1816 is often referred to as the year without a summer. There was great, just really awful weather. It was really dark. It was great with great clouds everywhere. Quite a lot. Not even a lot of kind of rain and storms particularly, but just this constant darkness, which made it a really quite surreal time, I think, for everyone. Just these constant low-lying clouds, which I think we can see as a real inspiration for this. In the summer of 1816, Byron was in Switzerland. He was in Switzerland with, not by his own wishing, with his mistress Claire Claremont, who basically followed him from London. She wrote to him very directly. As I said, very, very famous. After his early publications, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, she just acquired a huge amount of fame, and all kinds. Women were all after him. He was absolutely huge. And so people like, Claire Claremont literally wrote to him going, "Hello, I think she was 18 at the time. I'm an 18-year-old girl. I'm very, very interested in you. I think you're cool. Let's meet up." And he ignored her, for quite a while. And then, she used various different pseudonyms, sent him various letters about, I have great important business to discuss with you. Finally, she managed to get hold of him. Finally, they hooked up. He really didn't want any more to do with her after that. Okay, we hooked up, we had our thing, right, goodbye. Off he goes to Geneva. And she, being the determined young woman that she is, follows him. Now, this is particularly interesting because Claire Claremont's stepsister is Mary Godwin, who will become Mary Shelley, is at that point running around with Percy Bysshe Shelley, who is also married, by the by, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, so Claire brings Mary and Percy Shelley along for the ride. So this is the summer in which Mary Shelley starts to write Frankenstein. So it's a really profound and interesting time. We also have in this household a man called Polidori, John William Polidori, who writes essentially the first vampire novel. Certainly, there are various kind of vampire mythologies around there, but this is the one that kind of shapes so many of the tropes that we know, and it's based on Byron to a really significant extent. It's called The Vampire. I thoroughly recommend checking it out. If you've done Gothic with me, I've almost certainly mentioned it at some point because it's really cool. And this is a very Gothic text. So this is this group of writers, and they're all living together for this summer. They come to Switzerland for the summer, and they're not getting a summer. They're not going out on the lake. They're not boating. They're not relaxing in the sunshine, looking at the beautiful mountains, because it's just dark and grim. And so Byron writes this poem, and it is about darkness. It's about what if we don't ever get any sunshine ever again. It really links in with his pessimism, because it's not just, gosh, these days are bleak, aren't they? Ugh. It's saying this is about human nature. What happens when we lose the things that we have? How do we respond? Are we going to kind of pull together and come up with some kind of solution to this? So the concept here is the sun goes out. We have nothing about how it happens. He's not getting into that. He's not interested in that. He just says right there in the second line, the bright sun was extinguished. That's our concept. It's happened. And everybody just kind of loses their shit, basically. Men, where is this? Men forgot their passions. This is even before the earth has started to crumble, because obviously things aren't going to grow if we don't have the sun. So there is a sense that we as a population are kind of doomed. But even before we get to that, we forget what we love. We're so overwhelmed by this misfortune. And he talks about the kind of the craving for light that we have. The habitations of all things which dwell were burnt for beacons. I mean, what absolute madness to burn the houses. That's not the thing that you burn. They burn the cities. Again, what is the point of that? Other than this kind of greedy desperation for light. There's no cleverness here. There's no being sensible and thinking, how can we improve this? And a kind of fantastic vision if we think of this rugged, aggressive, frightening nature. We're talking about happy were those who dwelt within the eye of the volcanoes. This is the people in the most violent natural landscapes are the ones who are happiest here. And I mean, read this through in your own time. It's an absolutely glorious poem. I mean, so bleak and detailed and horrendous. I mean, a mad disquietude in the dull skies. I think it's just a fantastic line. I think one thing that's really nice here that we start to bring these personifications. So we have the personification of war, which is a very kind of even by Byron's time, it's becoming quite an old-fashioned thing to do, to have heroes, the personification of war. For a moment, everyone is so just overwhelmed by this darkness that they forget what they're doing and they forget war, and war doesn't happen. But then, hey, guess what? Humanity brings war back. You can always rely on humanity. We come on to the bit which I've already mentioned with the dogs. Even the dogs are fighting, apart from this one who is staying faithful, which is lovely. Now, I want to kind of bring us on to... Sorry, just trying to find the line here. Yeah, actually, there it is. It's right after the bit with the dog. The crowd was famished by degrees, meaning so everybody kind of dies out. The great population by degrees dies out, but two of an enormous city did survive, and they were enemies. So the idea that okay, in this huge city, one by one, everyone is dying, but there are these two people left, and this idea of kind of being the last surviving person was quite. It was kind of growing in the Romantic era from in various different poems. Thomas Hood wrote one which is a bit earlier, and a few years later, Mary Shelley would write a novel called The Last Man, which is about a plague that wipes out literally everyone in the world apart from one person, which is not great reading for just now. I picked it up the other day going, I might reread this, and I was like, maybe not right now. And what's fantastic there, they meet beside the dying embers of an altar place, which again they've brought everything from this church, these holy relics, things that should be sacred, should be special, and they've just burned them for the light. They raked up and shivering scrapped their cold skeleton hands these feeble ashes, and blew, and their feeble breath blew for a little life and made a flame, which was a mockery. And wonderfully, they're so emaciated that in this little flicker of light, they see each other, and the hideousness of the faces kills them. They just both drop dead, which is a nice bit of Byronic, just like exaggeration and how dramatic flair of these two last men alive see each other, and it's like no, it's not worthwhile. Ships sailorless lay on rotting on the sea. I think that's a fantastic image and one that kind of ties us back to Coleridge's Ancient Mariner. And everything dies. You know, the moon is mistress expired before, the winds were weathered in the stagnant air, and clouds perish. And then this last line, darkness had no need of aid from them. She was the universe. There is like an active power of darkness here. It doesn't need humanity. It doesn't need anything else from the earth. It just exists and is happy. And the thing that I want to tie back in here, or a thing that needs particular attention in this Byronic pessimism, is the very first line of this poem, which is, I had a dream which was not all a dream. So Byron is saying, yes, this is a kind of fancy. You know, was it a literal dream? There's certainly no record of him literally falling asleep and saying, yes. You know, it's quite a common trope at the time to just introduce, this is my dream, without literally meaning I fell asleep and this is the weird stuff that I dreamed. But that he has this vision, this idea, but then he immediately said, it was not all a dream. There is some truth in it, and I think the truth that he's kind of saying here is this is human nature here. Like, okay, no, the sun has not gone out. We can look up, no, it's still there. Good. But all of these things that he's kind of describing, he sees as, you know, intrinsic and things that have happened in, you know, in all kinds of wars and all kinds of terrible situations. So this is the Byronic pessimism, and this is it at its most bleak. What it does have that I think is really great fun that we haven't seen too much of is this epic scope. I mean, it'll be you can imagine a great blockbuster movie with this. I've included 2 paintings here by John Martin, The Great Day of His Wrath and The Expulsion of Adam and Eve, which is, you know, John Martin is famous for doing these wonderful apocalyptical scenes, really just to kind of to illustrate it. But Byron does often lean into this fantasy and into this Gothicism. And I think in a way, right back on the sort of the first slide about Byron, I had the phrase a romantic poet with a question mark, because I sort of want to say, well, is he a romantic poet? I think the writer that in many ways he's like is Mary Shelley. Actually, they share a lot of the same outlook, a pessimism and a kind of, well, human nature sure ain't great. They share a Gothicism. And this is something that I think I have mentioned in both the Gothic module and indeed when we were kind of looking at the various female poets, when I was talking about the various female poets when we looked at Charlotte Smith. There is a sense that Byron is put with the Romantics because he is of the same time, he is a poet, he is male, he is friends with them. But in a way, I think he kind of belongs with some of the novelists of the day. And also, I mean, why is Mary Shelley not considered romantic? Well, mostly because she writes novels rather than poetry. And you know, there are plenty in both of their works that I think, you know, they wouldn't cross over. But he's no Wordsworth. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And I'm not saying it's entirely a good thing. But he's I think unique amongst the poets that we're going to be looking at here. So we'll quickly look at the love sonnet, All for Love, and then we're going to get on to Don Juan, which is going to be fun.